Welcome to Buccaneers Insider Live, presented by Miller Lite. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. And man, for a time of year that is normally pretty dead around the facility, supposed to be a time of year there's not a lot of news, we got some things to talk about. Not necessarily going to lead off with the most exciting of news, but it is news nonetheless. Rob Gronkowski announced his retirement. I'm sure a lot of Bucs fans are very sad for both his on-field participation and then also just for who he is and the fun that he brings to this team. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts when you heard that he was retiring.
Well, I wasn't shocked. We had heard that a decision was coming pretty soon, and we were ready to go either way. And it just, because it had taken so long, I thought there was, probably we've talked about this a number of times, right? I think I probably sounded a pretty optimistic note most of the offseason, but as it dragged on and on, I started to wonder, and it's not really welcome news, to be honest. I mean, it's great for him, and just like when Ali Marpet retired, congratulations. You know he's going to have
well earned.
He's exactly well earned, and he's going to, I'm sure, have many ventures that he's going to enjoy,
many opportunities. So, I feel like every commercial I see on TV has him in it, so I'm like, he's doing just fine.
Endorsements will keep him afloat. But it really isn't probably the best outcome for the Buccaneers. I mean, it's funny because I just had a question sent in to me for my mailbag on Buccaneers.com. Very good-natured question, not rude or anything, but just making the contention that maybe the Buccaneers were better off without Rob Gronkowski. And I'm like, no. I mean, it really, honestly, I think his season last year was even a little bit better than some people realize. I know he did miss some time due to injuries after playing every game the year before, which was pretty incredible. But his yards per game was something like 60. It's going to come up on screen at some point. It's something like 68.8. That was 68.8. That's the third in the entire league among all tight ends. And, these are guys. Mark Andrews is just coming into his own. Travis Kelce's still in his prime. I mean, Rob here in his 11th or 12th season, hanging with these guys and still putting up numbers that you probably didn't realize were that good. And he's also a great blocker. So he was very important to the offense last year, and things are going to change. If you look at it's Bruce Arians isn't the head coach anymore, but Byron Leftwich is still the play caller, and it's a lot of same coaches. And if you look at the history of Bruce Arians dating back to Arizona and Byron Leftwich, the tight end wasn't really heavily involved in the offense until Rob Gronkowski came along. So because the Buccaneers now are relying on Cam Brates at the top of the depth chart now, and we love Cam, and he's still a great player, and he's great in the red zone. But I think he had about 25 catches last year. I mean, you don't expect him to have 70 yards a game.
Right.
And then you're relying on a couple rookies, Cade Otton and Coke Kieft and maybe Cody McElroy, and they could all be great players, but none of them are proven yet. So things are going to change, and maybe it'll be an offensive change. Maybe more 11 package with three receivers, because we still have great receivers. We added Russell Gage. Maybe throw the ball more to running backs, because you got both Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White. So I think it's more than just how do you replace Rob Gronkowski. I think it's, hey, this is going to change the offense in a material way.
Yeah, and the fact that he could both be such an incredible receiving tight end and blocking tight end, not only is it just what those two things individually bring, but the fact that you didn't know with him being out there what that meant the offense was going to do. There was so much more obfuscation with that, whereas now, even if you have a tight end that can be an incredible pass catcher and you have a tight end who can be a great blocker, you're putting where they are. That kind of tells the other team what's going to happen. And so just for some of the, trying to be the trickeration, one of my favorite non-words of all time, it kind of could hurt that. Disguise. So the disguise of it, I feel like is a little tough.
Well, I got two reactions to that. One, obfuscation is a fantastic word.
Thank you.
Congratulations for
Thank you.
And not only using that, but nailing it perfectly in context, but also, I guess, if you're looking for that kind of tight end, the guy that you think could possibly be that guy is Cade Otton. And there are plenty of people that think the Bucs got a steal in the fourth round. His numbers were not particularly good as a senior, but he had dealt with some injuries, and frankly, the quarterback play at the University of Washington wasn't very good at all. Their passing attack overall wasn't very good. So there are plenty of people that think that he's got the potential to provide a lot more, and he's also already considered a pretty good blocker. Now, we'll find out how that translates to the NFL level, but he's a guy that you could possibly find to, at some point in his career, hopefully sooner than later, to be one of those kind of hard to find two-way tight ends. that can give you that obfuscation.
Right. And Gronk, not the only player that the Buccaneers essentially lost this week. Bradley Pinion was released, and another area where you're looking to a rookie to hopefully fill in these pretty big shoes to fill. And so tell us what your thoughts were about the things that led up to the decision of Pinion being released and why they believe that Jake Camarda could be the guy.
Yeah, there's obviously, this was not a surprise. It was expected. It was expected as soon as they drafted a punter in the 4th round, Jake Camarda, as you said, out of Georgia. And you don't draft a punter in the 4th round if you don't think he's going to win the job. And then he's on the roster. Bradley Pinion was still on the roster, and we still have Sterling Hoffrichter, who was on our practice squad last year, who was on the roster too. And so somebody asked Coach Bowles during the minicamp, "Are you going to take 3 punters to training camp on the roster?" And he pretty much flat out said no. So you kind of knew this was coming. I think it probably had something to do with Bradley fully recovering from the injuries that he had last year. So Bradley gave us 3 good years as a punter, and not only was he helpful as a punter, but also he was a great kickoff guy. I mean, look at these numbers.
Yeah.
In 2019, he actually set a record for most kickoff touchbacks.
Wow.
That's the most anybody's ever had in one season. But you can see he's top 5 every year, both in total touchbacks and in touchback percentage on kickoffs. So that's a weapon. But the Buccaneers touted Jake Camarda when they drafted him as the same sort of two-way weapon, that he's a very good kickoff guy too. They say not only can he blast out of the end zone for you if that's what you want, which is basically the choice we've been making for the last 3 years, but he can also give you that mortar kick. And we talked about this before, where you try to drop it in so they can't get a touchback, maybe they catch it around the 1 or the 2, and your coverage team is down there, and if you get the guy down before the 25, then that's better than a touchback.
Right.
So hopefully Jake Camarda can replace Bradley's kickoff, what he brought in the kickoffs, which was a lot. Okay,
and then now I know that we talked about this is normally kind of a dead time of year around here, that we got a few weeks before training camp starts, but we are going to be announcing today, if you check out Buccaneers.com, the dates for training camp practices, and the practices are going to be open to either season pass members or some individual groups that they'll be inviting out. So if you were wondering if you were one of those people that will have a chance to make it out to training camp, make sure that you check out Buccaneers.com later today. But we also always love talking about just training camp battles, things that we're excited about to go watch ourselves, or if you're going to be one of the people out there. So what are some of the things that you're keeping an eye out for at training camp?
Well, to go along with what you said about about coming to training camp, we also found out, of course, the starting date. So that's pretty cool.
Yes.
July 27th. It's a Wednesday. That's the first practice. And then I think the first practice where they have pads on, because you have to ramp it up. And the NFL keeps kind of extending that period. It used to be like 2 days before you could put on pads. Now it ramps up for like the first 4 days in terms of how long you can practice. And you start off in just no pads, and then you could put on spiders. And the first full practice day, I believe, is Monday, October.
Oh, I know. It's like, wow, weird, training camp is long.
It's really long this year. The ramp-up period is like 4 months.
Yeah.
It's Monday, August 1st, I think, off the top of my head. Again, look at Buccaneers.com a little later this morning. You should find all that information. When that comes, obviously you always are talking about training camp battles. And honestly, the Bucs don't have a ton of them, because they have a very good roster with most of their players back, not Rob Gronkowski, as we just mentioned, but most of the spots you can pretty much guess who's going to be starting. So we're going to look at some of the, I'll call them battles. They're not necessarily all battles for a starting job. Some of it is, how much are these guys going to play? How much are they going to split, reps, that sort of thing. Like, for instance, the one we know for sure is an outright battle is left guard to replace the retired Ali Marpet, where it's Aaron Stinney and Luke Gedeke. And a couple other guys like Robert Hainsey and Nick Leverett might figure into that. These are the 2 primary guys that we believe are going to be competing for the right guard spot. But then look at these other places. Jason Pierre-Paul is gone now. Everybody, it seems pretty likely that Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is going to step up into his spot. But don't forget about Anthony Nelson, who finished with more sacks than Joe last year, and really finished the season very strong. So how is the rotation going to work between those two? In Ndamukong Suh, it doesn't look like he'll be back after the Bucs signed Akeem Hicks. Logan Hall they drafted. So is that a battle for a starting spot? I'm not sure, but how is the rotation going to work out? And you see the other things up here: Jordan Whitehead, Ronald Jones, who's the second running back. Is it going to be Rashad White? Keyshawn Vaughn's still around. We talked about Rob Gronkowski. Antonio Brown really was the third receiver for most of last year, and I don't have Russell Gage up here because I kind of think we already feel like he's the third guy when Chris Godwin is healthy. So he's probably the second guy until Chris Godwin gets back. So these are some other guys. There's others, but these are some of the primary guys competing for the the third, fourth, fifth, those kind of receiver spots. So there's a lot of good battles to watch. They're not all necessarily who's going to start at this position, but they will determine what the Buccaneers do, what their rotations are, what they do on offense, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. What do you think is going to be the position that when we end up talking about how many people get kept at a certain position? Wide receiver is definitely one of those. Linebacker can sometimes be one for special teams purposes. So what are some of the positions you think we'll be talking about in terms of more of either a special teams reason being they keep an extra person, you know, maybe the return game, we didn't have Jalen Darden up there on that list, and what are some of those positions you think we'll be talking about?
Well, you named it there, and actually on almost every training camp we're talking about that, the receivers, because it seems like over the course of the 3 weeks or whatever of training camp, there's 1 week where this young guy shines and then this young guy shines, and lots of times they can't maintain it. So maybe they've shown enough to get on the practice squad, but they're not bumping, you know, Tyler Johnson out of a spot, something like that. But with Chris Godwin's uncertainty at the beginning of the season, and like you said, with possibly one of those guys, maybe Jalen Darden being your primary return guy, you probably usually target 6 receivers. Maybe they keep 7, especially if Chris Godwin is on the roster but not on PUP, something like that. Also, if you got to keep an eye on the cornerbacks and safeties, because I think it's a little bit of a give and take there. There might be a total number of defensive backs together, but are you going to keep 6 corners and 5 safeties, or 6 corners and 4 safeties, or 5 safeties and 5 corners? And some of that has to do with versatility of players, like a Logan Hall gives you a lot of versatility, Mike Edwards, Antoine Winfield, and so that'll be interesting, because you know you did add Keanu Neal and I think I said Logan Hall, but I meant Logan Ryan. Mike Edwards is still around, Antoine Winfield, and then there's some young guys, and you just, you know, will one of them make it over the other, over a corner? Zion McCullum, you know, you have him at cornerback. D. Delaney had a good offseason. Rashard Robinson's a very good special teams player. So a lot of special teams will figure into it, but I think the give and take between the cornerback and the safety positions will be interesting.
Yeah, I do think the safety competition will be interesting. That we do know Antoine Winfield Jr. He's a lock. That's a lock. But then that other spot, and how that rotation could look, and are they bringing guys in, or is it a guy that plays most of the time? That I think those guys between Mike Edwards and Logan Ryan and Keanu Neal, that's a really interesting group.
Yeah, and I think you'd want to get a lot of those guys on the field a lot. I mean, and that's where Logan Ryan, for instance, his versatility helps out, because, you know, Mike Edwards may not be the exact fit for what they want to replace a Jordan Whitehead, right? They're not really the same sort of player, which is why they commonly rotated with each other, depending on situations. So it could be packages, it could be sometimes maybe Antoine Winfield's playing more around the line of scrimmage, and Mike Edwards is more of a free safety, which is really probably what he's best at, right?
We put Mike Edwards in on the interception packages.
Right, anytime we need an interception, put Mike Edwards on the field.
Throw him in there. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Buccaneers Insider Live, presented by Miller Lite. We are so excited you had joined us. We were sorry we had technical difficulties. We couldn't answer Facebook questions, but we'll be back with plenty of these before training camp. So any of those questions, come on back, ask them another time. We'll see you then.